For every new band or artist, the first album is a pretty big milestone. There are some artists who were able to hit it off on the first go, while some artists took a bit to find their stride. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. As you can see behind me, all those CDs stacked up are all the debut albums that I have in my collection, and we're going to go through every single one of them. So I'm going to be going through each album by the decade they were released in, so we're going to be starting with the 60s and going all the way to present time. So without further ado, let's begin. So we're starting with the 1960s, and as you can see behind me, it's not a very big stack, so this section won't be too long. Before I actually start, one more thing I forgot to mention is that not only is it going by the decade, I'm also going to be going by the date it actually came out in. So my oldest album, and by oldest I mean the oldest one that was released, dates back to January 1st of 1967, and I'm referring to The Doors, self-titled. Starting off with a good start already, I must say. The Doors, of course, iconic band from California, of course, with Jim Morrison on vocals, Ray Manzarek on keyboards, Robbie Krieger on guitar, and John Densmore on drums. And this is a good example of a band really hitting off on the first go, with many iconic songs like Break On Through, Soul Kitchen, The Crystal Ship, 20th Century Fox, Light My Fire, of course, End of the Night, and of course The End, a perfect album closer, so very good debut already. Next up, I remember the date on this one because it was the exact same day that Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band first came out, and talking about Pink Floyd with their debut, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It took me a while to kind of get into this album. I do like it, but still not an album I'll actively go out and listen to. This is technically the first and only album with Syd Barrett really in charge. Of course, by the time they get to the second album, he was already losing it. But this is kind of like the only album where he is fully aware on what's going on. And it's very psychedelic. It's very experimental. And it's kind of that's kind of why I always prefer the more 70s material than the 60s. But there are some people who really love this era of Pink Floyd, and they think it's the best era, which is fair enough. I can see it. But for me, not an album I'll be actively listening to, only when I'm in the right mood for it. Coming up, I already talked about this in my previous video, and that's Creedence Clearwater Revival. If you want more of my thoughts on it, then please go ahead and in the description there's a link to my ranking of the CCR albums, so go ahead and check that out. Alright, next up, the band. Music from Big Pink. Love this album. If you love Americana, more roots rock, then this is definitely a go-to. I think this is a 50th remaster of it, because the album cover is a little bit different. The color's a bit more brighter, and it sounds great, I must say. Of course, Tears of Rage is great, and of course The Weight, which is one of the most well-known songs here, which I love. In a Station, Chest Fever, I Shall Be Released, very good. And fun fact, that's Bob Dylan made the cover, which is pretty cool. I also talked about this next one not too long ago as well. In a previous video, it was one of the, I think I got this in March, and that's Deep Purple. To kind of give a summary of my thoughts on it, I really do like it. Rod Evans sounds good, and the whole band at this point also sounds pretty well. Personally, I think they would find their stride when they got Ian Gillan on vocals, but then again, I probably do need to listen to more of the Rod Evans era. I know there's two more, but this is definitely a good start, I must say. The only downside is that I'm not a big fan of the covers, honestly. Things like Help and Hey Joe, they're fine, but I think the original compositions are far better, in my opinion. But still pretty good. I like it. Of course, can't talk about the 60s by talking about this iconic band. This is actually, we're in 1969 already. We have Led Zeppelin, a monumental album in the development of hard rock and heavy metal. Of course, a lot of covers on it, but they make all the covers their own, which is just incredible. Starts off with Good Times, Bad Times. I love it. One of the great openers of all time. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is amazing. Dazed Confused, which is another very, very, very cool song. It's one of the earliest bass lines I learned on bass. And of course, it finishes off with How Many More Times, which is just, it's probably my favorite song on the album, to be honest with you. But the whole album is just killer. So definitely a very important album in the history of rock in general. Okay, so now we finally get to an album where the band definitely have not found their stride. I'm talking about Genesis. I talked about this in another previous video when I ranked all the Genesis albums. So if you want more of my thoughts on it, then go check out that video if you haven't yet. But to make it simple, it's okay. Some people might have the same opinion on this next one. Of course, in my opinion, I still think it's very good. And we have Yes. This is Yes's debut, again in 1969. 1969 was kind of where progressive rock was really starting to find its footing. Of course, by this point, it's not really called progressive rock. And to some people, this is not quite progressive rock, but this definitely has elements of it. And this album kind of shows what Yes was doing and what they would later do later on down the road. So some people aren't really particularly interested in this album. This again is still Yes trying to find their sound, but you definitely see hints of it in this album, which is pretty good. This is with the lineup of John Anderson, Peter Banks, Chris Squire, Tony Kaye, and Bill Bruford. And I still think the band were still pretty good by this point. So I like it, but I get why people might not be into it very much. And then we have one more in the 1960s, dates to October 10th, 1969. By the way, I do have notes to help me keep track of the dates and all that. But to finish off with the 60s, we're closing off with a really good one, In the Court of the Crimson King. If I had to do a video talking about my favorite album covers, this would definitely be in it. Like, look how cool that is. Like, there's this, you see it once and you're immediately interested. Like, what the heck is this? And the music itself is amazing as well. This is definitely where progressive rock really made its mark. It's very, very strange. The first track, 21st Century Schizoid Man, when I first heard it, I was totally like, what is this? But every time I listen to it, I just love it more and more. It's only 5 songs, but all of them are just amazing. So if you have not heard this album yet, then go check it out. It's definitely a must listen. So now we're moving on to the 1970s, and as you can see, I have a lot. 2 stacks it took. So we have quite a bit to get through, so we'll try to get through this as fast as we can. So we're starting off, first one dates back to February 13th, 1970. Now, what's interesting is that this album came out in the UK on February 13th, but it didn't release in the US until June 1st. But I am strictly going by the original date, so we're sticking with the February 13th. So, Black Sabbath, self-titled. Definitely where heavy metal became what we consider heavy metal. Of course, it wasn't called that by that point. It was probably still considered like hard rock. But yeah, I mean, what can I say about this album? It's definitely important. Not only did it start heavy metal, but also brought in other subgenres that we know today, like doom and just incredible. Like, I love the album cover. It's really cool. Like, it's very striking. It just perfectly describes the overall mood of the album. So very cool, love it. Next, Dry Heap, very heavy, very humble. I really do love that album cover. It's kind of weird. From what I can gather, it's David Bryer with a bunch of spider webs all over him, which is pretty cool, pretty interesting. And might as well, and while we're on the topic of the cover, might as well talk about what the US cover was. And it was this. Pretty weird. Don't know why they thought that, but whatever, regardless. Still pretty cool. But yep, Uriah Heep, definitely a good, strong debut. Has some pretty iconic songs like Gypsy, of course, is probably the most well-known song on here. And everything else is great. So yeah, very solid start. I think they'll do better on the next couple albums, but you know, still pretty good. I like it. Let's see, coming up next. Now, this next one is their first album, but it's also their last. They're kind of a one-album band, but I'm including them. Fuck it. So next up, we have Derek and the Dominos. Very bluesy. Of course, it has the title track Layla on it. And yeah, it's very good. I really do like it. Probably need to listen to it again. It's been a while, so don't have a strong opinion of it as of yet. Okay, got more progressive rock. We have the debut of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This is a 2 CD pack. So if you let's open up real quick. You get a lot of good pictures here. And those are the 2 discs here. Again, another strong debut. But again, I think they do better moving forward. But this is still a good first impression. Of course, you have Keith Emerson, who's just a master at the keyboard. And then there's Carl Palmer, who is a great drummer. And then you have Great Lake, who, of course, we already talked about King Crimson. But yeah, very good. Emerson and Palmer aren't my favorite progressive rock band, but I really do respect them, and I'm very glad I own this. So good. Sorry if the camera shakes. It's on the bed, so if the camera, I'm putting the CDs on my bed, so that's causing the camera to shake. So apologies for that. So now we're in 1971, and I only have one album from this year, and that's ZZ Top, with ZZ Top's first album. It says it right there. Perfect description. So yeah. This, and by the way, this comes from my ZZ Top box set. It covers their first 10 albums, so pretty cool. That includes this one. I don't hear that many people talk about this album very much, and I don't know why, because I think this is very good. A lot of good songs. Very, again, going back, it's very bluesy, which of course that's what ZZ Top's all about. It's all very bluesy rock. Very underrated, I must say. So now we're just moving to 1972. Sorry for that cut. I just realized my CDs were out of order, so I had to fix it. So now we're back. So moving on to 1972, Blue Oyster Cult. A lot of casual listeners probably only know Blue Oyster Cult for their big hits, but if you go back, they were a very good heavy rock band. And this is a great introduction to them, I think. I didn't know any of the songs going to it, but after I listened to it, I immediately became a Blue Oyster Cult fan. So yes, go ahead and give these a listen. So coming out, we have Styx with their first... Oh, I should probably explain this. So for those who don't know, this is a 2 CD pack. This comes with the complete Wooden Nickel recordings. So it has all the albums where Styx were under the Wooden Nickel label. So they released 4 albums by this label, and to various degrees. So it does. So let me just show you what the cover looked like. So this was their first album. That's the cover right there. This is another one of those debuts where the band obviously are still trying to find that sound. It has one like 13-minute song, Movement for the Common Man, which is kind of interesting. Has a bit of prog elements to it, which is pretty good. It does have some covers though, which is expected. There's some decent songs on here, but again, it's stereotypical, like the most generic debut album you can think of. A bunch of like deep cuts and a bunch of like covers. So for Styx, they still needed a couple more years before they find that commercial jackpot. Okay, so we're just gonna move on to some Steely Dan. Pretty sure I've talked about this recently as well. Like I recently started getting into Steely Dan way more recently, and I had to get the first album, and just again, like I think they hit it off pretty well. Of course, at this point they were still a band. You know, it wasn't just Walter or Donald, but they actually had other members. And yeah, this it sounds very good. It has some, it's very jazzy, bit of funk elements to it, but it's great. I really like this one. Okay, moving on. We're in 1973. Aerosmith with their self-titled. Not a very good album cover, I must say. But again, like I mentioned, this is one of those debuts where a band trying to find their sound. It does have most well-known song "Dream On" it, which is pretty much the only reason why you would want to get this. But that being said, like all the other songs are still pretty good. Of course, if you listen to it, you might notice Steven Tyler doesn't sound like how you usually think of him. From what I've heard, when they were recording this album, he was kind of shy and was kind of self-conscious of how his voice sounded in the studio. So in order to do so, he kind of had to put on like a James Brown impression. And Dream On's kind of like the only song where he's kind of using his real voice, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I think by the second album, he kind of found more confidence, and that became the Steven Tyler we know and love. So yeah, the debut, I think it's still worth checking out, but yeah, you know how it goes. You already know my thoughts on this band. Like, one of my all-time favorite bands of all time, and this debut is no exception. Didn't sell as well, but this is definitely Queen in the rawest state. But to me, this is still a terrific album. Like, just absolutely love it. Next up, Leonard Skinner. We have some Southern rock here. Of course, it has Freebird on, and it's probably another one of those most well-known songs. But has a lot of good songs as well. I Ain't the One, Tuesday's Gone, Simple Man, Mississippi Kid. Again, top to bottom, very good. Another band where they knew what they wanted to sound like, and they hit it off right away. Here's a band some of you might not know. We have Montrose, and if you see this guy right here, you might think this looks somewhat familiar, and that is Sammy Hagar. This is actually the first band he ever sang in. If you wonder what Montrose means, it's referring to the guitar player. Joey Montrose was his name. Let me just get a picture out. So here's another picture of the band. So there's Sammy right here on the side, and oh, sorry, did I say Joey? It's Ronnie Montrose. I'm so sorry, but yeah, that's him right there. So Montrose, very hard rock band from the early 70s. Sounds great. The guitar work is great. Also, Sammy sounds really good as well. To many people, this is kind of like their only good album, because the second album they kind of lost. They kind of lost what they started, but I don't know the full story. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. Okay, 1974. Kiss. Sorry for the glare. For a lot of people, the early studio albums probably don't sound that great. And to many people, they sound much better on the live album, which I do agree to an extent. But I still think you should check out the studio stuff. I think they're worth buying just so you have the whole catalog. And the production again is not that great, but there's still some pretty well-known songs on here. Of course, Strutter, Cold Gin, Deuce, Black Diamond. Yeah, it has a lot of very, very well-known Kiss songs that many people enjoy. So I think it's worth buying just for that sake. Rush, their debut, the only album with, I'm trying to remember. God, I blanked on his name for a sec. John Rutsey. That's it. Sorry. But yeah, he's not as good as Neil. Yeah, the lyrics aren't as good as Neil's either, but for a first album, I think this is very much overlooked. It's very much like your typical 70s rock, but there's nothing wrong with that. I think both Getty and Alex, they play really well. Even John, I like John's drumming too. It's very straightforward, but that's what that's the music they were making at the time. So that's a given. So yeah, Rush, again, haven't quite found that little spark, but this is definitely a good starter for them. Kansas. I do like this album cover. This is I know that's John Brown. He was an radical abolitionist. There's a whole story on behind that. But yeah, I like the historic element to that. Kansas, American prog at its finest. Of course, they had a bit of boogie rock in here as well on this debut, which is good. I mean, yeah, I really do like it. I still need to listen to it. I do like it, but again, like I said, I probably need to spend more time with it. But there's still some very good songs on here. Bad Company. This comes from my other box set, which has the first 6 Bad Company albums. And yeah, what can be said about this one? Again, it's another very well-known debut album, one of the best ones in my opinion. Top to bottom, great songs. Paul Rodgers, love his voice. Absolutely incredible. And this is a gatefold as well. Kind of replicating what the vinyl had. But yeah, very good. Love it. Okay, 1974 still. We have one more from 1974. Judas Priest. Again, I already talked about this in my previous video. It's good, like blues rock, but still not quite the Judas Priest that we know. And by the time they got to the second album, they pretty much found their own sound, which is great. Next up, now we're in 1975. See, I'm trying to go by quick because again, we're almost done here, but we still have a lot to go. So this is a long video. Okay, Journey. Some people only know the Steve Perry era, but this is early Journey with Greg Rowley on the vocals. Very surprised by this. It's more jazzy, has a little bit of a prog edge to it, but it's great. I love it. The guitar work by Neil Schon is fantastic. So real quick, let me just say who was in the band by this time. You have Greg Rowley, like I mentioned, Neil Schon, of course, Ainsley Dunbar on drums, George Tinkner on rhythm guitar, and Ross Valerie on bass. So, if you only know Journey by the Steve Perry era, and you do not like the Steve Perry era, then, maybe give this a shot. Maybe you'll find some enjoyment out of this one. You never know. And next up, Hearts. Gotta have some female artists in here as well. Magic Man, Crazy on You, Dreamboat Annie, Soul of the Sea. Like, it's definitely a very, very important album. I really do love Heart. The vocals by Ann Wilson is fantastic, and Nancy Wilson is one of the great female guitarists of all time. And yeah, just great, fantastic. Now we're in 1976. The Ramones, their debut. Yep, have some punk as well. Open that up. Not the hugest punk fan, but the Ramones as a band, I really should start buying their albums. I do like a lot of their songs. Yeah, so, yeah. I just had to get it. Boston. What can be said? What can't be said, I should say. I mean, every collector should have this album. Cheap Trick. Very good one. Very good start. Trying to see, like, Hello Kitties is great. Daddy Should Have Stayed in High School. Taxman, Mr. Thief. Hot Love. The Ballad of TV Violence. Yeah, really good one. I'm starting to get more into Cheap Trick, so I'm really enjoying that. Foreigner. I mean, again, they pretty much pretty much had so many hit singles off this, and no wonder they would be one of the most successful rock bands ever. Yeah, very good. Now, most people tend to look away from Foreigner, but if you look at the deep cuts, you'll find some good gems in there. Rest in peace. Meatloaf, of course. Now, this isn't the first album he's sung on. He sung on a bunch of records prior, but this is the first like solo one he did. And of course, Bad Hell, of course, which needs no introduction. It's a killer album, like one of my favorite albums of all time, if I'm going to be honest with you. So, absolutely love it. Van Halen. This is 1978. Again, what's there to say? I mean, Eddie Van Halen, one of the most iconic guitarists of all time. Kate Bush, The Kick Inside. She's weird, but goddamn, I love it. Yeah, this is probably the most rock-esque album she's done. Then again, I still need to listen to more of her early work, so I could be totally wrong on that. But yeah, very good. This isn't the original album cover, by the way, which I'm kind of disappointed in. This is like the US cover, I think. I think the UK was I know the UK was a lot different, which I prefer, to be honest with you, but oh well. I'll take it. Cars. Again, iconic one. The perfect album to many. I won't argue with that. Whitesnake. Trouble. Now, this is probably the first band in this whole collection where this is their first like actual debut, but they released an EP before that. But I am not including EPs. I'm only including the full-fledged debuts. So we're talking about this album. So this one's, I think I said it already, it's called Trouble, and very good. Like most people think of Whitesnake as that glam band in the 80s, but if you go back, they were a hard rocking blues rock band. Very good. Yeah, like give the early stuff a chance. Give the early Whitesnake a chance. So, yes, moving on. We're almost done with the 70s. We have a few more to go. Okay, Toto. Really big seller. Hold the Line, of course. Big hit off here. And that was like the only song I knew on this album, but after hearing the whole thing, like my respect for them has tremendously gone up. Like the musicianship by this band is just incredible. Like, love it. Absolutely wonderful. Okay, we're still in 1978, honestly. Police. Very good one again. Man, I do not have that many like crappy debuts. I'm noticing, like, so many big hits on here. Joy Division. Got into Joy Division last year. Had to get this album. Just a classic. This 2 CD pack. I think this is one I've already brought up before, but I had to say it again. But this is also becoming one of my favorite albums of all time. Music's great. Lyrics are pretty dark, but still very, very. You definitely feel the emotion off it. Ian Curtis sounds good. Like, yeah. Then finally closing off with the 70s in 1979, we have Christopher Cross with his self-titled. Soft rock at its finest, I must say. Just, there's so many good songs on here. Many people aren't huge fans of soft rock, and many people kind of resent this album because it won album of the year, I think, beating out like Pink Floyd and their other artists. But if you just ignore all that, this is still a very good album. So I'm glad I have this. And it was a lot, but that is the 70s. So moving on to the 80s. So moving on to the 80s, as you can see, not as much as the 70s, but still quite a lot. So let's get through these now. Def Leppard. Now, I am I am part of that camp where I am very familiar with like Hysteria and Pyromania, not so much the early stuff. And this is a used copy, by the way, and if you open it up, it's very obvious, especially this booklet, which has seen better days. I mean, just look at it. Like, what is this? But regardless. So anyway, so I got this album not knowing anything, and I heard it and I liked it. It's okay. And I've listened to it again very recently, and yeah, I still enjoy it. It's very much Def Leppard in their rawest state. Still pretty rocking though, but again, I guess I'm more spoiled with the more polished version. Yeah, that's just me, but I still think it's pretty decent. I still think it's worth checking out just to see where Def Leppard got their start. Iron Maiden. This is when Paul Di'Anno was on lead vocals. Sorry if there's a glare on my face, sun. Anyway, yeah, still very good. Open it up. That's what it is. There's the band at the time. Again, very strong debut. I think the next album is far better, but I still think this is still pretty good. This is another one where it was released in the UK in September of 1980, sorry, but it didn't come to the US until 1981, which is pretty interesting. But again, sticking with the original dates, we're gonna go with Ozzy, Blizzard of Oz, his first album. Of course, we all know Crazy Train and also Mr. Crowley. I don't know, Goodbye to Romance, Suicide Solution. Like, again, hit out of the park. And really thanks to Randy Rhoads, with his great guitar work that really elevated Ozzy's sound during this time. So yeah, very good. Love it. Phil Collins, Face Value, of course, is the not 19, this is 2016, I believe this issue came out. This is when he reshot the album covers, which many people were kind of mixed in. I don't mind it. It's whatever. But yeah, this is a 2 CD pack. A lot of people, there are people who don't particularly like Phil's solo stuff, but I still think this debut has a lot of those elements that I think many people would enjoy. Yeah, it has the big hit In the Air Tonight, but to me, it's probably the best song to use a drum machine ever. Just perfect mood for it. And yeah, there's a lot of ballads on here, which is a staple of Phil Collins' solo stuff, but I think the ballads sound great. But there's a couple like very jazzier stuff, more world music-esque stuff, like Droned and Hand in Hand has that more world/jazz feel that he did earlier with like Brand X or with like Genesis and all that. But yeah, Face Value, I love it. Not ashamed to admit it. The Go-Go's, gotta have more females in here. Yeah, very good. I mean, probably to many, this is probably their best album, the most cohesive album, which, yeah, fair enough. I mean, it has a lot of big hits on it. Of course, Our Lips Are Sealed, How Much More, Less for Love, I love that song. Of course, another big hit, We Got the Beat, This Town, like, yeah, very good. As for this artist, of course, Stevie Nicks, her first solo album released in 1981. Yeah, great, awesome work. Dio, of the Dio band. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's Ronnie. What else do you want me to say about that one? Metallica, Kill 'Em All. Again, definitely in their rawest form, but still thrash rock at its finest. Just very good. Of course, I prefer Ride the Lightning, but that's just my opinion. Alcatraz, already talked about this one recently. Graham Bonnet on vocals, which automatically I love, and has Yngwie Malmsteen on guitar, which he sounds great on. Yes, very good. Recommend you take a listen to it. Now this one, I wrote it in 1984, but for the life of me, can't figure out when it actually came, the actual date it actually came out on. But whatever. 1984, Dennis DeYoung, Desert Moon. I like the hits on here. Don't Wait for Heroes and the title track. I really like those songs. I really love Desert Moon. But the other songs, they're fine. They're okay. Rats, again, they released an EP before this, but we're sticking with the date with their full-length albums. We have Out of the Cellar, my first Rat album, and I loved it right away, and I still do, really do. As with this band, Queensryche, again, EP, talking about this. The Warning, yes, very good. I think they found that sound pretty early on, and of course it all came to a head with Operation Mindframe, which I love. Whitney Houston, yeah, it's just showing just how diverse my collection is. But yeah, Whitney Houston, her first album, it's very it's 80s pop. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, Whitney sounds great. Always loved her vocals, just very good. A lot of good songs on it. Some of you might not know this band. It's actually a Canadian band. They're called the Northern Pikes. I would say it's like pop rock. Yeah, pop rock. That's probably the best I can describe this band. Still good though. I really do enjoy this one. Oh, and some CDs fell. That's okay. Guns N' Roses, probably one of the most iconic debuts ever. I do love it, honestly. Yeah, most people don't like Guns N' Roses, but some of you, they think they're overplayed, but I still love them, so that's my stance on it. George Michael. Yeah, honestly, I'm not the biggest George Michael fan, but there's some good songs on here, so I can't complain. Rest in peace, by the way. Yep, I got his album. Yeah. He's a guilty pleasure of mine, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I do like his other songs that, especially and even the songs that didn't become hits, I still enjoy. I love his voice. I like that deep voice he has. And finally, to finish off the 80s, we're going with Sanctuary. Don't know why it took me a while to say that. But yeah, Sanctuary, a band I had no idea about until I saw a video on YouTube that talked about them, and that got me interested. And immediately loved it right away. From the first song I heard, Battle Angels, just hooked me in right away. The vocals are great. The band, it sounds amazing. Yeah, recommend you take a listen if you haven't heard it. It's power metal, but it's not like most people think of power metal as the ones with the keyboards and all that. Like, no, this rips. So listen to it if you're into like power metal and all that stuff. And that finishes off the 80s. So now we're in the 90s, and as you can see, I don't have many. I only have 3. So this won't take too long. So we're starting off with Tool with their first album, Undertow. I probably need to re-listen to it again. It's been a long time since I've heard this one, but I think I liked it when I first heard it. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that one. Some of you might not know this one. We have Amy Mann. This is her first solo album. She was in the other band. I forgot the name of it. It has Tuesday in it, I think. Blue Tuesday, I think. I could be wrong. But anyway. But yeah, I decided to check out her solo stuff. I really like it. It has some good stuff. It's like, has a bit of an alternative sound to it, but it sounds good. I like it. Yeah. I think it's worth checking out. And finally, well, again, just showing my broad range of type of music that I like. Yeah, Britney Spears. I know, funny, very funny, I know. But yes, it's just some great pop music. When this come out, it came out January 12th, 1999, the same year I was born. Of course, I wouldn't be born until October, but yeah, same year. I'm roughly the same. I'm gonna be the same age as this album soon, so that's cool, in my opinion. But yeah, Britney Spears, yeah, a lot of good songs. I know she's going through a lot recently, but I'm sure, hopefully she has some good coming to her pretty soon. So yeah, Britney Spears. Okay, time for an impromptu insert footage segment. I don't know what to call this, but anyway, so the reason why I'm doing this is because I realized while I was editing the video was that I didn't record 2000's Onward. I thought I did, but turns out it wasn't recording, so I just talked to nothing. So let's just make up for it. So I only have two. It was the shortest patch, so only two to go through. So the first one is actually right here, right next to Kiss. If I can get it out, you have Linkin Park. I've always loved Linkin Park. It just means a lot to me. I grew up listening to them. Rest in peace, Chester Bennington, right there. But yeah, just so many great songs on here, and I mean, like I mentioned, like Linkin Park has a special place in my heart. I've always had a soft spot for them. I mean, here's the track listing right here. A lot of great songs on here. Some classics like Crawling and In the End, of course. But yeah, really good. Just wanted to give it at least some love here. Okay, and the second one is right here. Don't judge how I store my CDs. If I can just get it out. This is one that not many people will know, but this is a pop duo. This came out in 2017, and they're called Superfruit. Like I said, they're a pop duo. What this album was is that it was originally just 2 EPs, but then they decided to make a full album by combining those EPs, so it counts. It's called Future Friends, by the way. If you're not a fan of like your typical like modern pop music, you're probably not gonna like this. But you know, there's some catchy songs in here, so yeah. I just wanted to include that as well, and I'm gonna put that back later. But yeah, that's it. All right, back to the video. That was a lot. That was every debut album that I currently own, and I know there are some that I didn't mention because, again, I don't own them. So maybe in the future when I get more debuts, maybe I'll do an episode 2. But if you enjoyed this video, then please go ahead and give it a like. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like these. In the comments below, tell me what's your favorite debut album, and if it's an album that I don't own, maybe I'll try to get it. But yeah, that does it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.